Okay, and then I'm going to also share my screen. So you all are seeing the presentation, right? Okay, good. All right, so let's go ahead and start through this session. We're going to really talk about the model information, including the funding goal priorities for this cycle, how funding will be structured, eligibility criteria, how to apply, and the evaluation criteria. So as I said, we're also going to have some time for questions at the end once I've presented the information. And I wanted to also say, as we go along, you can feel free to drop questions in the chat box. So that you don't forget your question, but we're going to wait until the end to really walk through those questions and respond. We are going to email out these slides to all registered attendees that were here today. And as I said before, we're going to record this portion, but we are going to stop when we have the question portion. So before I wanted to begin, I wanted to kind of go over some information about our foundation directed grant making, generally speaking. So we have 3 what we call leadership grant making areas of focus. And so in these 3 areas, which are arts, culture, and creative economy, capacity building, and youth and families, we incorporate not only distributing grant funding, but also community leadership strategies. So this means that in these 3 specific areas, we'll be utilizing our staff voice, our staff time, and the foundation's position to advance regional work in these particular areas. For arts, culture, and creative economy, we partner with the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. And so through this partnership, we distribute grant awards for artists throughout what our region is, which is Region 5. That includes Carbon, Monroe, Lehigh, and Northampton counties. Monique is the key point of contact for these arts and culture opportunities. But I wanted to briefly mention that we have 2 open grant applications right now: Entry to Program Stream and the Creative Entrepreneurs Accelerated Program. So Monique is going to drop a link in the chat where you can learn more about those open applications, but wanted folks to know about that as well. Then we have our youth and families, which is now open and which we're all here gathered to learn about. And then we have our capacity building program, which is grants to organizations to strengthen their infrastructure, as well as convene a community of practice. I wanted to let everyone know that we'll have information released about this capacity building opportunity in February of 2022. We also, in addition to having these leadership grant making areas of focus, we have support grant making. So that includes the Synergy Fund, where we support long-term affiliations. We also have the Upper Bucks Community Fund, which focuses on that geographic region and arts and science and education. Additionally, and that application opens typically in the fall. And then we have the Fund to Fight Substance Use Disorder, which is actually in its last and final year, and we're already committed to certain organizations. So those are the other support grant making opportunities that we have at the Community Foundation. So for the youth and families, I wanted to start with eligibility criteria. So you have to be a qualified charitable organization in order to apply. Organizations may apply through a fiscal sponsor. You must deliver youth services or programs in Lehigh or Northampton counties. And the definition that we're using for youth is those who are aged 24 years or younger. So you must meet those criteria in order to apply as basic criteria. I wanted to also go over the funding structure. So we, as I mentioned before, we have a number of funds that were all focused on supporting youth and families. And so those funds, when they're together, are nearly $200,000. And basically, they're all mostly area of interest funds, which are basically a fund in which the donor has said that they would like to support a particular area of focus, but they haven't specified or named any organizations. So it leaves it up to the community foundation to select organizations that best meets that fund's goal. So I wanted to say that I know that many of you have submitted separate applications for these separate funds in the past, but that is no longer necessary. We only need one application for consideration of all these named funds. And I also know that in the past, some of these area of interest funds funded specific projects or programs, but we are now shifting all support to general operating. We feel like this is important, especially during this time, to champion general operating. The funds that make up the youth and families model are the Edward and Inez Donley Fund, Walter and Alma Bastian Fund, Outdoor Recreation, the Romeril Campership Fund, the Driver Fund, and also support from Roger and Kathy Yacht. We also included a typical range. So it's 2,500 to 10,000. We will not give grants less than 2,500. We wanted to provide this range so that organizations can decide if it's worth your time and energy to complete an application, and also for you to have some type of expectation of what the grant award would be. All right. So when we crafted this goal statement, we looked at all these different area of interest funds and what their intersections were. And as I said before, really thought through, our experiences from, both the national level and also in our partnerships with community leadership to craft this goal statement, which is to grant flexible funding to organizations that provide comprehensive approaches in engaging youth and their families in seeking a pathway for meaningful life aspirations. So there's a couple things here that I wanted to pull out. The flexible funding piece is about the general operating support. When we're using words like comprehensive and meaningful life aspirations, what we mean is that we want to fund organizations that engage the whole young person and all their needs, wants, desires, and aspiration in order to support them. So in this current cycle, we have laid out a couple of our priorities, which I wanted to go over. For each of these priorities, I will go deeper into what they mean in the following slides. So our priorities are: one, that funding will be prioritized to those organizations that are guided by the community they serve. Two is that we're really looking at wanting to support programs and services that address mental health needs in young people and focus on youth leadership. We also want to support organizations that provide services for youth that are most at risk for exiting the human services safety net. And lastly, organizations that offer transformational youth programs and services. So when we put these priorities together, we knew that we were going to need to really define what we meant by a lot of this. So some of this some of this language may be familiar to some of you, and some of it may not. But we really tried to come up with concrete ways to explain these sort of definitions of what we meant by this. So I'll be running through that in the next couple slides. So first of all is, what does guided by the community really mean? And we are offering this specific framework in order to better define this for applicants. This graphic is called the Wheel of Participation. When we are looking to support organizations that are guided by the community they serve, what we are looking for is, in what ways does your organization is your organization influenced by the community and the vision, values, and strategies that drive your work? So this speaks to that there are these different levels of community participation, which is detailed in the framework. And not all levels will be engaged with everything, but what we are looking for is what is your sort of standard way of operating within your organization. And so as you can see by this graphic, there's inform, there's consult, there's participate, and there's empower. With inform, an example is like a monthly newsletter that your organization puts out. Consult could look like an annual survey that your organization distributes and then uses that feedback to influence programs and services. Participate could look like a community advisory body that has genuine control over decision-making. Empower could look like your board members and leadership reflecting the community that you serve. And so we'll be asking you to identify in what ways are you guided by the communities you serve. And we are looking for organizations that really fall in empower and participate. We are really looking also for in what ways is your organization guided by the young people that you serve? So how do young people influence, you know, your mission, vision, values, the strategies that drive your work? So we also are prioritizing these two particular areas, and this is based off the highest emerging needs among youth in which private philanthropic dollars could make a difference. So one is addressing mental health needs in young people, and two is focusing on youth leadership development programs. If you don't focus on these two areas, but you do provide youth services, you are still eligible to apply. So I wanted to say that. And then also we are seeking to prioritize youth that are most at risk for exiting the human services safety net. There are many examples which we provided, and I don't think that we captured everybody that fits into this category, but we wanted to at least provide some concrete examples of what we meant by that language. And so that could mean immigrants, LGBTQ+ youth, those students who have exited the school system, youth that have been involved in the criminal justice system, or those that have families that have been involved. So we are specifically looking at, you know, trying to support youth that fall into those categories, or that, you know, are a combination of many different things that they've experienced. And then we're also looking to fund organizations that do their work in a way that is transformational. And I know transformational is a hard word. So when I thought about this, there are a couple different components to it. Ultimately, transformation, the definition of this is the process of a thorough or dramatic change that adds value or worth. And so thinking of that definition, we wanted to provide a couple different elements that, or frameworks that speak to this. So one is that we're really interested in organizations that include some of the elements that are in this framework. So that means targeting life skills such as belonging, mastery, independence, generosity, that it really incorporates, the programming or services really incorporates the heart, the head, health, and hands, and that it will lead to youth really being more connected, having more confidence, building character, building compassion, and that there will be many different developmental relationships as well, including attachment, progressive complexity, balance of power, and reciprocity. So these are some of the elements that we're looking for in programs and services that would speak to these programs being engaging for young people and beyond human services, but really engaging that whole young person. Additionally, not only in the program or service, we're really looking at some elements within the organization as well. So if you have this program that's fostering these positive youth development traits, then the question is, how is your staff and the organizational culture itself reflecting the life skills that are being emphasized to young people? So how does your staff and the organizational culture really foster belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity in your everyday operations? And youth engagement includes really understanding the needs, wants, desires of the whole young person and providing appropriate information, services, and support for the whole young person. And that speaks to sort of the comprehensive services that we're looking to fund. And beyond just engaging the young person, really thinking about the whole family unit and the ways that organizations can really understand and develop meaningful, authentic relationships with the whole family unit. And that youth choice and voice is really apparent within the programming in the organization. So how are young people able to influence the program and also the organization themselves, and that also that organizations have an environment where youth can be 100% authentic selves at the organization. And then in a lot of our partnerships with organizations, what we look for is really working with organizations that continuously learn and foster a culture of curiosity. So those are some of the elements that we'll be looking for within the organization. So the Community Foundation will also utilize an equity lens in our funding distribution for youth and families. And we are utilizing an equity lens because our mission is to really strive for quality of life for all Lehigh Valley community members. And we know that funding disparities exist within philanthropy itself. And we know that barriers currently exist for diverse organizations in accessing funding, and we want to remove those barriers. And we know this from national research that's been published and also local qualitative data. There are many different reports and research that I could distribute to folks. Some and I don't want to spend a lot of time during this info session, like kind of rehashing those statistics and numbers. But just generally speaking, as a couple data points to share, for every $100 awarded by US foundations, only 28 cents supports LGBTQ issues, for example. And for Black and Latina or Latinx individuals, while they comprise 30% of the US population, there's an underrepresentation of executive leadership in the sector, which equals only 10%. And of those organizations, there's only an estimated 4% of total grants and contributions. So to receive 10%, that's an estimated $22 billion in additional grants and contributions. So these statistics are really just, I'm putting them out there to say there is disparities in how funds have been distributed, and the Community Foundation has committed to using an equity lens and distributing funds that we have discretion over. Meanwhile, while there is this disparity, diverse organizations continue to meet their mission in really needed and valuable ways. And so we, as I've said, we believe in equity and we need to walk the walk. And so therefore we will be using an equity lens in funding distributions. A couple ways in which we are going to be doing that is provided here. So one is the process of funding recommendations. So the advisory committee that is charged with recommending funding is made up of diverse experts in the field of youth and development and is inclusive of young people themselves. The way that we're marketing the grant application will be marketed broadly, and we'll be utilizing diverse networks in order to get the information out. We also have an option to collect responses via video and voice recording in the application rather than just written responses. So we had realized that, that collecting written responses can sometimes create a barrier for people. And so in order to provide an alternative, we have instructions on how to upload videos for each question. And you can still submit written text if you'd like. And you can also do a combination. So you can, submit some written text and then upload some video. Either is fine. In the instructions on the grant application, you will find a link that details how you can upload videos. And again, this is really because we want to be funding those programs that are making a difference in community, not necessarily those that have the most well-polished grant application responses. So as another way of ensuring equity in this process, we'll be providing accessible technical assistance throughout the process. So basically, Monique and our main role through the end of February is to answer everybody that has a question and walk people through the application. Additionally, we're going to have some grant application office hours where we'll just be hanging out. You can come hang out with us. So I'll share those dates and times with you all. And then we have also specifically written on our website encouragement of specific populations to apply. And those include those populations that there's obviously like some disparity in funding distributions. And then our committee will be recommending funding awards taking into account equity. And so these are some of the ways in which we're implementing an equity approach. I will also say that we're new at this and we're open for your suggestions and recommendations. And so we do consider ourselves a learning foundation. So as we move along, we also want to hear from you. One thing that we are doing as well is that we are collecting some demographic information from applicants in order to make sure that that we can then distribute funding equitably. So we're doing this because we recognize the importance of holding ourselves accountable and increasing transparency and sharing our journey with our partners. We'll be using this data to help the foundation understand how well we reflect the needs of the communities we serve, to equip our staff with critical data to assist grantees and applicants, and also to enable the foundation to track our own progress and report to you all, how we are doing. So basically in the grant application, you'll see a link to a demographic question survey. And when we created this survey, we were trying to accomplish a few things. One is obviously collect the data we need to meet our goal of walking the walk. But secondly, we did not want to overburden applicants by suddenly requiring detailed demographic statistics from everybody without the proper support or time for people to collect that data. So we were trying to balance those things, and you'll see that in the way that we ask the questions. So this survey should only take 5 minutes or less to fill out. We ask more detailed demographic questions about your organization's leader and how they identify. But for the leadership composition, meaning the people who have decision-making power in your group or organization, which is typically the board and executive leadership, we ask demographics as a whole group, not individuals. And we also ask if there are any specific populations that your organization was designed to serve. We are also trying to get a sense of what demographic data, if any, your organization is currently collecting, so we can get sort of a sense of what folks are already doing in the field and where people are at with their data collection. Basically, your honesty in this is important for us to really understand, the field. And so we appreciate, your willingness to fill out this information. There is also an option to not disclose on every question if you prefer. I do think, though, that in future years, not only with the Community Foundation, but also in the field generally, it's starting to be a standard part of many applications. So a question for us is, how do we build the sector's capacity to collect this data in a way that helps, right? And we appreciate your partnership as we learn and do this for the first time. All right, so the timeline for grant making is here. So we're having this info session today. We're also going to have another information session on February 1st. We'll put a link up for that on our website very soon. We're going to have these grant application office hours on February 24th, 5th, 25th, and 28th, 1 to 3. So we'll have like a public Zoom, and we'll put it on our website. And we're doing it close to the submission date because questions come up at the end. And we want to be able to be very accessible for folks to just like pop in, ask their questions, get some help whenever they need it, and know that we're just there, right? So we're just going to be hanging out there, and you can pop on and ask those questions as needed. And so those are the dates that will be readily available. The deadline for the application is February 28th. We'll be reviewing it in March. In April, there will be a notification. And then in December, we're asked for a report. So that's the timeline for grant making. Next is how to apply, which I'll hand it over to Monique.
Sure. Thank you, Megan. So applications must be submitted online through Foundant, which is LVCF's grants portal. If you've submitted an application with us previously, you likely have accessed Foundant before and likely have an account already. Foundant does require online registration. However, interested applicants can preview the Youth and Families application using our public apply link, which is listed on our website under the Youth and Families webpage. When you're ready to draft your application, you'll either need to create a new account or log into your existing Foundant user account. If you need to create a new Foundant account, you will be able to do so from the home screen. Should you have any problems accessing your existing account, please do not create a new account. Rather, send me an email at monique@lvcfoundation.org. Also, you can do that as well if you have trouble creating a new account. As we mentioned, I am the technical assistance guru, so I'm happy to assist with that. Once applicants begin drafting their application, you are able to save your draft in Foundant until you're ready to submit. So that's always good news. You'll be able to go back in and edit anything you need to edit. As Megan mentioned, the application does allow for video or voice responses to specific questions. The instructions are listed in the application. There's a hyperlink that will take you to those instructions. But again, if you need any assistance with that as well, please send me an email. I can also drop my email address in the chat too. All right. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you. So ultimately, you know, we're going to be evaluating this based on the priorities that I have gone over. So we'll be really looking at areas of focus, mental health and or youth leadership development, the population served, those young people most at risk for exiting the safety net, organizations that are guided by the community they serve, those organizations that provide transformational programs and services. We'll be wanting to, you know, really partner with folks that are sustainable and curious and have a culture of continuous learning. And then lastly, we'll be paying attention to equity in our funding recommendations. So those are the evaluation criteria. So at this point, I'd like to, we have about 13 minutes left, which is perfect. I'm sure you all have lots of questions. I'm excited for your questions because that's how I'm able to kind of get a pulse on what you're thinking. So we're happy to answer any of your questions, hear your comments, hear your feedback. We are really excited to hear from you. Monique, to start with, are there questions in the chat that we should